Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Happy December, happy Christmas season. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the last month. I had a pretty good reading month in November. I think I read about 16 books. A few of them were short stories. I didn't actually read as many pages as I normally would have. And also I found it a bit of a struggle to get through some of these books, even though I found this month one of my favorite reads of the year. Something about my reading this month, it wasn't gelling very well, and I don't know how to fix it for next month, but I'll be filming my TBR very soon after I film this video, so we'll see how I deal with that. But I have all sorts of genres here. I've got sci-fi, I've got fantasy, I've got dystopian, I've got literary fiction, historical fiction, short stories, poetry. There is some of everything within this reading wrap up, and I'm gonna go from best to worst. But I already know that the worst video in this is gonna be a rant review of this book. So if you're interested in seeing me ranting about this book, then you can skip to the end of this video. But we're going to start off happy. We're going to start off with the best books that I read this month, including one of my new potential favourites. And I was kind of saving this book all year. I knew I was going to read it this year and I was really excited to get to it because I love this author and I was hoping that it would be a 5-star read, and it absolutely was. And that book is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a 5 out of 5 read for me and I absolutely loved it. I'd also just picked this book up after I DNF'd a couple of other books that I will mention as well at the end of the video, which ones I DNF'd. But after I DNF'd those books, you know that feeling when you just finally pick up a book and you just feel like you can relax? That's how I felt picking up this book, because sometimes when you're starting a new book, you're a bit anxious. You're what's going on? Am I going to like this? What's going on? You're in the hands of the author in that moment. But when I picked up this book, I was just okay. Even though I'm confused, because these books are confusing, just the writing, just the feel of reading this book just put me at ease. I was I already know that this is going to be a banger, and a banger it was. So this book is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's the second of her sci-fi adult books that I've read. I read her young adult fantasy series, Wizards of Earthsea, and I also read The Left Hand of Darkness last year. And then I read The Dispossessed, and I think it's really hard to choose my favourite out of Left Hand of Darkness or The Dispossessed, but this one might just edge it. Basically, this is a sci-fi book, but it's very philosophical, political sci-fi, as usual with Ursula K. Le Guin. Basically, in this world, there are two planets very close to each other, or it's a planet and a moon, and there are two very different societies living on these different planets. And there is not much mixing that goes on, despite them having a common ancestor, them both being from the same planet. The people on the moon do not mix with the people that's still on the planet, and their societies are set up in incredibly different ways. But this book kicks off when a man called Chevek comes from the moon and he goes to the planet. And he is doing this because he is trying to advance his theory about universal theory of time. He's an incredible physicist on his planet, but to be able to push his theory to the next level, he needs to collaborate with other great minds. So he leaves his home, which, because it's on such a harsh, environmentally difficult place to live, people there have a really strong community and collaboration, and because it's the way that they need to survive, there's no real such thing as being individualistic. But when he goes to this other planet, it is set up in a very different way, and he finds himself kind of being tied up within this political game and being used as a pawn in a game that he doesn't really understand. I just absolutely love Ursula K. Le Guin's writing in general. I think that she's a genius, and just the way that she explores concepts and ideas, I'm just obsessed with. I always know that reading her books is going to stretch my mind in some way, and that is just something that I almost get scared about before reading her books, and then afterwards I'm so happy that I've read them, because it's given me a new perspective and it makes me a better reader. So this is an easy 5 out of 5 stars, and this is definitely going to be on my best books of the year list already. I know that. And this was the only book that got an out and out 5-star rating for me this month, but we had a few that were 4.5 and got pretty close, and the next of which I read very recently. I just finished this, and it was Chain Gang All Stars. This is another one I predicted I would really like, because lots of people who I have similar taste to have said that this is one of their favourite books, and I absolutely did really love it. This book is a dystopian book set in the near future America, and it's basically setting up this prison system where prisoners for really serious crimes can opt in to this program where they have to fight in death matches against other prisoners. And if they manage to survive 3 years in this program, then they can be freed. So you follow a few different characters, but mainly 2 different women who are in this prison program. And they have managed to start up a relationship and they are in love despite like the horror and terror of the world that they're living in, having to fight in these death matches. This book really had everything because it had that personal touch with these characters, but also the political and social commentary of this was just absolutely spot on, because often you're zooming out and getting point of view chapters from different people, some people who are on the outside protesting these games, some people at the very top of the system who are the people who are making sure that these games are making a lot of money. But also the use of footnotes in this, I think, really are what drive it forward and drive it home in terms of how dystopian this is and how close to our current reality it is, because it will be talking about like in real life what kind of laws and policies have been passed to strip rights away from people, and about the types of tortures that people are facing in the American prison system currently. And so while you're reading this like really fast paced, really like compelling story about these characters and these battles, it just makes you realize how close to our own reality this like incredibly kind of sensationalized version of these prisons are. I thought the writing was really amazing. I really liked the characters, and I just thought this was absolutely an excellent read. The only reason I think for me is it didn't get a 5 out of 5 star is because of just the very ending. I just wanted a bit more after that final scene. I just felt like, and that's maybe just like a testament to how good this book is, that I just wanted even more, but I just would have done with an epilogue or one more chapter or something about some of the things that we left unfinished. But I do understand the stylistic choice of why we ended where we did. Just to me, I wanted a tiny bit more, so it can't be a favourite, but like rounding up to 5 stars, like very, very excellent read, and I highly recommend. Next book that is a 4.5 stars is another author that is like vying for being a potential favourite author of all time, and I don't often have favourite authors of all time, but Naomi Novik may be jostling for one of those spots, because I read Buried Deep by Naomi Novik, and this is a short story collection, and they are set in the different worlds of some of her books that I've read. So I've read Spinning Silver, Uprooted, and I've read her Scholomance series as well, and now this, and I just absolutely love her writing. These are such lovely short stories, and I also like very wildly different from one another. Like some of them are like a fantasy take on like Pride and Prejudice, some of them are like alternate history set in ancient Rome but imagining that dragons existed, and then other ones are set in the worlds that she's already created in her other books. But actually one of my absolute favourites are a new world that she's created that I just found so interesting, and now it's making me excited because I think that she's going to start publishing like full-length stories within that world. But this is just another book that I highly recommend. 4.5 stars for me. If you've already read Naomi Novik books, then definitely pick this up. If you like short stories, also pick this up. I wouldn't say this is my like number one recommendation of where to start with her books, but still, for me, 4.5, loved it. And I also just love this book so much. It's so pretty. So those 3 are my 3 favourite books for this month. But next up, also in the 4-star, 4.5-star range, I read the next book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, which is the Voyage of the Basilisk. I really liked this one. I like all of these books. They're not like my absolute favourite series, but the more and more I read, the more I become really obsessed with this story, and I just find them so much fun to read. So this one's the 3rd book in a series, so I can't give you too much actual plot of what's going on. But these books all follow Lady Trent, who is a budding naturalist, and she wants to be the world expert on dragons. So these are set in a world that is quite similar to our own, except for that dragons exist. So in these books, you're following Lady Trent as she is basically going on these different exhibitions, these adventures, because she has a undeniable thirst for knowledge and passion for knowing everything that she can about dragons. And she is such a fun character to follow because she is not without her flaws. She can be very prideful, she can be very stubborn, and she puts herself in like ridiculous situations. I just really love these books. Also, I think I have like a hint of where I want the romance to go in this, and I just really hope it does go in that direction. So I'll definitely be picking up the next book in this series as well. Next up, I read a short story by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it is called The Lover, and I rated this 4 stars. This is a really short story. This is like 40 pages long, and I really enjoyed it. There's not like that much I can say about it. It's fantasy, it's kind of like dark, it's very mysterious. And this month I actually read another one of Silvia Moreno Garcia's short stories, which is The Tiger Came to the Mountains, which was much more like a historical, kind of like a literary fiction one. And then The Lover was a like fantasy romance short story. Out of the two, I preferred The Lover just because it was exactly what I wanted at the time. Like, I've been really enjoying short stories this month so much because I think I've been doing so much more writing this month, and for the first time, like, my reading has really been affected by my writing. I'm really focusing a lot on like my plotting and a lot of like my character development, and every time I would pick up a book, I would find myself over analysing what was happening in the book, which is why I couldn't pick up anything that's even like remotely similar to what I'm writing at the minute, except for short stories, because then something about it was like, it was satisfying my need to like read and consume a story, but it wasn't like getting tangled up with my own story inside my own head anyway. All that's to say, both of these are excellent. If you like this author's writing, then these are two excellent short stories. They're just like very fun, very quick reads. The Lover is kind of a fun twist on Little Red Riding Hood, kind of. And then The Tiger Came from the Mountain is, I think, actually based on a story from the author's own grandmother about something that happened during the war in Mexico. Next up, another 4-star read from me is a book that I picked up because it was nominated for the Goodreads. It was in the long-listed version of the Fantasy Awards. I don't think it made it through to the shortlist, but I had wanted it to read it anyway, and then I picked it up this month, and I really enjoyed it. And the book is The Dead Cat Tails Assassin. I've read a different book by this author before, and I have to say that I preferred this one, actually. They have a certain style, and I just think it worked so much better with the characters in this book. This is another one that's pretty short, like it won't take you too long, and I read it in just a couple of days. So basically, this book is set in a city where a guild of undead assassins, and they're called the Dead Cattail Assassins. And basically these assassins have made a deal with the goddess of death that when they die, they are brought back to become assassins for the guild. But they're not supposed to have any memories about their previous life at all. And basically with every contract they have, there's 3 golden rules. The contract has to be just. They are only allowed to kill the people they've been contracted to kill. And thirdly, once they've accepted a job, they have to kill that person with no exceptions. So in this book, you're following Evine, who is an assassin, and she goes to kill someone she's been contracted to. But for some reason, as soon as they get face to face, Evine has a memory from her life before that should be impossible. So this book is set over the period of like just one day. It's really fast paced. It's got an amazing duo of the main 2 characters. They're really funny and witty, and I really liked like their whole interactions. And also I felt like the author did a great job of building up this world so quickly. So I can highly recommend this one, and I listened to it as an audiobook, and the audiobook was also really, really good. So that is one that I gave 4 stars. Let's move on to some other books that I also gave 4 stars. I finally read Penance by Eliza Clark. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I love Boy Parts by this author, and I've just been holding off for some reason on reading Penance for ages. And I think it's because I don't love true crime. I've never been interested in true crime as a genre of anything. And this book is all about true crime. But I should have known that because it's Eliza Clark, it is such a twist on that, and it's such an interesting take. So basically, this book is about a journalist who's investigating a murder that happened of a 16-year-old. This murder happened almost a decade ago, but he is going around and re-interviewing all of the people involved and kind of putting together a definitive account of what happened. So a lot of this book really reads as like a non-fiction or like a true crime kind of podcast, but everything is obviously fabricated. But because of that layer, you have a really interesting commentary on true crime and it being a hobby for some people, or like a spectator, or it being a like a genre, or like something that you can spectate. Because I don't ever like really engage in any true crime, like I don't listen to podcasts, I've never read any true crime books, and also even like thrillers and mysteries are like not my number one genre of things to read. I was really worried at the beginning of this book, especially when the murder itself was being described. It's incredibly graphic. It was really hard for me to read, even though I knew that this isn't actually real. So I would say be warned going in, it does start off incredibly dark. Because of the nature of what it's describing, it is such a quick read. It's like so compulsive. And then there is also that kind of double layer about like unreliable narrators, and should we even be talking about true crime in general, which I think was done really well. The reason this isn't a 5-star for me is because I did think it got a little bit repetitive, and also like the bits about growing up as a teen girl in a small town, that felt a little bit repetitive to me. And also like I've lived it, you know, know, like I don't need it to be described in that much detail. That's probably just a personal thing. So I do feel like it dragged a little bit. It was a little bit too long, and I do feel like there's kind of those three suspects in this case, and the most interesting of the initial suspects got the least amount of page time, I'd say. Kind of think by the end that it was kind of like rushing to finish this book off. Like something about it kind of left me feeling like a little bit unsatisfied. But overall, still a great read, like a 4-star from me, easy. And the next 4-star book was also another one from the Goodreads Choice Awards, but this was in the young adult category, and I had it on my shelf and I've been meaning to read it for ages, so I picked up Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, and this one was so much fun. I already knew I was going to like it because I really like Lex Crouch's other adult books. I hadn't read any of their young adults. It's not technically a King Arthur retelling. It's set like generations later after King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table have died, and you're following some of like the descendants of people in those stories. But if you like King Arthur retellings, like you will get that vibe definitely within this. So basically in this story you have Gwen and Art, and they have been engaged since they were newborns. The only problem is that they hate each other, and they always have hated each other. And this isn't one of those typical like enemies to lovers when they end up really falling in love. They genuinely are not in love because both of them are in love with someone else. So this is a lovely queer young adult book about growing up different with expectations and trying to figure out who you are and love who you want to love. It's got Lex's like trademark witty banter in there that I really love, and so I would highly recommend that as a young adult romance book. So much fun. Next up, I'll talk about a book that I'm not going to rate because it's actually a memoir, so I'll just put it like right bang in the middle because I don't know how to do it in terms of ratings. But I read Small Bodies of Water, which is a memoir. It's a collection of essays, and they all kind of coalesce around the theme of water and swimming. So the author of this book has grown up in New Zealand but has lived in many different places, including in Shanghai and in London and I think Borneo as well. And so a lot of these essays are a reflection about cultural identity and not feeling like you're fitting in the place that you are. And I love nature writing anyway. I love anything that is like really deeply connected to nature. So those are my favorite essays within this. I also really liked the essays about music. There was a whole one about Mitski, and also other essays about Studio Ghibli movies that I also really like. Overall though, I would say it's not going to be my favorite memoir or essay collection, except for the ones that I've just mentioned. I do feel like a lot of them were not distinct enough for me, and I'm not sure why it was split up into essays rather than being like a overarching memoir. Like the thread through didn't quite like work for me. The writing was very beautiful, and I would recommend it to anyone who like really resonates with those themes as well. Okay, so next up we're in the 3-star range. Out of the 3-star books that I read, or this would be the 3.5-star, and that is another Terry Pratchett. I read Pyramids this month, and it was very fun as always. Terry Pratchett books are always so much fun, and I just love reading Discworld books. But I would say I didn't love this one nearly as much. I think I like really peaked with the last couple that I read, and then this one was like a slight downward for me. I did really like how it like ramped up a lot of questions about like the nature of Discworld and like the religion that's going on. This is the 7th Discworld book, but I think it's the first in like the gods collection. I think I just wanted to return to like my favorite characters, which are the witches. Really liked the assassins that was going on in this book, but a lot of the middle part of this book felt, I don't know, like I just kind of got a bit lost in it. But as always, these are really fun. Something about Discworld is like just so cozy to me. So that's Discworld. That was a 3.5. And then I have about 3 or 4 books that are just like a straight 3-star read that I enjoyed but like were not my favorites, or like would only recommend to certain people. That's kind of how I think of as a 3-star read. Firstly, let's talk about Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. I have seen so many different thoughts about this book, and I thought perhaps I would love it a lot more than I did, but overall I still enjoyed it. I'm not one of the people who really was disappointed in this, but for me I think it set up a lot and it promised a lot, and then it didn't quite deliver in like the second half, or like the third of the book. Because basically this book is about an undercover agent, as she has been sent to France to worm her way into this group of eco-activists. And so that's exactly what she does, and she is a very like ruthless person. She kind of doesn't have strong personal morals, which means she is very interesting to read from, and also you don't know anything about her or her background or how she's gotten to be the person that she is today, which I think is a very interesting and fun choice for her character. And basically, this eco-activist cult are in contact with a man who is, I think, like an anthropologist, but basically he has gone so far as to believe that humanity is kind of doomed in the way that it's living, and we have to return back to the way that we lived in the very early age of man. So like when Neanderthals were still roaming of the earth as well. So even though our undercover agent is there to try and kind of sow discord and also report back on this kind of cult, she herself becomes very interested in this man and this man's ideas about how to live. I really enjoyed a lot of the chapters that were really focusing on human history. So like a lot of these are emails from this person who is living in a cave as a early human. And so you hear a lot about his research and his thoughts. And I actually studied a bit of evolutionary anthropology in my degree, and I found it really interesting as well. And a lot of it I kind of was really remembering as well from lectures and essays that I've written. But just for me, like I said before, I think that a lot of things were set up and promised and then didn't deliver in the second half. But I still found it like a very engaging and interesting read. It's definitely not going to be for everyone, and it's not as exciting as the blurb describes it to be, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think kind of go in with like managed expectations. So that is Creation Late. The next 3-star was a poetry collection. I'm trying to become a poetry girl, and so this was one of my first forays into the genre, and I read God Complex by Rachel Allen. And I really enjoyed the process of reading this actually, and I don't know how to rate it in terms of out of a 5-star read, so I'm rating it right in the middle here as a 3-star, because obviously some of the poems are beautiful and I was like taking photos of them and, you know, wanting to like underline, and then some of them just like left me cold, which I think is gonna be completely normal. So this poetry collection is all about, it's kind of like a running narrative about the breakdown of a relationship and also our relation to the environment and environmental like degradation and like climate change as well. So sometimes those things tied together beautifully and it was a beautiful poignant poem, and sometimes it just like didn't quite work for me. So a 3-star read, but if you're into poetry, definitely check out some of Rachel Allen's books, or poems I mean. The next 3-star read that I want to talk about is the book that we did for the book club. So if you don't know, I host a book club called the Reading Around the World book club, where we read a different book from a different country every single month. And for the month of November we did Kazakhstan. So the book that we chose is this short story collection called To Hell with Poets. And this is the second short story collection that we've done from Tilted Access Press actually. We also did Indonesia from the same publisher. And so these are short stories all about kind of like the everyday rural life. They are very slice of life stories about living in Kazakhstan. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, because I do feel like I learnt about the culture and about these people and about like it had a certain tone the whole time, and I really did enjoy that. But this book is very slim and there are a lot of stories in here, meaning the stories themselves, some of them are literally 2 pages long, and I think like I do like short stories, but they just didn't give me enough, and I would just find myself thinking like, oh, what was the point of that story? I feel like you just told us a background about a character and then they didn't do anything, or we didn't go anywhere with them. So some of them I really enjoyed. My favourites from this collection were, I really liked The Cobbler, The Taming of Actori, and then which one else did I like? I liked Ice Cream as well. I liked the ones that had a little bit of happiness in there, because a lot of them were quite sad and quite bleak, but it was a really interesting collection and some people in the book club really enjoyed it as well. If you're interested, there's always a link in the description to join the book club. And if you didn't see my announcement and you're in the book club, for the month of December, we are using it as a catch-up month. So if you've not read one of the books from the previous months in this year, then it's your time to pick that book up and finally read it and add your review as well. And also for anyone who has read every single book that we've done so far this year, I did announce a giveaway as a kind of way of saying thank you so much for the people who have been really diligent and really engaged in the book club. So for the people who have read every single book so far this year for the Reading Around the World book club, I am giving you a free book passport. So if that is you, then please get in contact with me. I have already sent this out to a couple of people who have been huge supporters of the book club and have read every single book this year. So thank you so much to you too. You know who you are. But if you joined more recently and you're upset about missing out about that giveaway, then stay tuned, because I will be doing more giveaways in the new year as well. So yeah, that was a 3-star read from me. And then the next one was also a 3-star, but I would say Now I'm looking at it, maybe less. Maybe I gave it 3 because I felt kind of weird about giving it lower, but it's this one, Wandering Souls, and this one was so incredibly hyped when it came out, and this was longlisted for the Women's Prize in 2023, and it's one of the ones that I didn't read back then because it's a historical fiction, and it's not usually my favourite genre. Or it can be. I can love it. It's just like there's some historical fiction that I don't get on with that well. So take this review with a pinch of salt. And I think that I am definitely in the minority here with not getting on that well with this book. Because realistically, I'm probably going to... This is probably like a 2.5, like instead of a 3. And I feel really bad when I rate like beautiful, sad historical fiction books low. Because I feel like so many people, they would really connect with this and feel it, and especially because a lot of this story is true for so many people as well. But something about it actually being written as a fiction book just did not work for me, unfortunately. So this book is about a group of 3 siblings, and they leave Vietnam in search of a better life. But then when tragedy strikes and their parents aren't able to follow after them, they're left alone in the world, forced to survive in a very hostile environment to them. And it's basically about, it's quite a simple book about them growing up and kind of their different reactions to how they've tried to survive. But just something about this didn't work for me, and I'm finding it difficult to like put into words as well why this didn't work for me as a fiction book. I feel like as a memoir it would have been incredibly powerful, but just these characters did not feel quite real to me, and they didn't feel very fleshed out, so I found it really difficult to deeply connect when things were happening. Also, as we got later on in their life, they had massive time jumps in terms of what was going on, so then you feel like quite like wrong-footed almost, because then so much has changed within that time jump. And we got to the very end, and I'm not sure what the entire point was, other than it was like a very sad life that they had, and that family is important, if you know what I mean. Like, other than like the normal things that you would get from a book, like I'm not sure what like its take was or what it was specifically trying to do. I don't know, maybe I'm just being so harsh. I'm not really like describing this very well, but just for me this one didn't really work. But now we've come to the point in the video where I have to talk about the worst book that I read this month, and I don't think I've seen any bad reviews for this book, so I was quite excited to read it, and that is The Bee Sting. This was like a 1-star read for me. I really did not like this book. Firstly, I will say I listened to this as an audiobook because the actual book itself is like 650 pages, like 700 pages, and it's a literary fiction. So that is incredibly long anyway. And the audiobook was over like 26 hours or something. So that does definitely contribute to my negative opinion of it, is it being so incredibly long and such a time sink. Basically, this book is about a family living in Ireland, and you follow each person in the family. There is 2 children, a teenage daughter and a young like preteen son, and then a mother and a father. And the beginning of the book, you are just going from like point of view to point of view. Like there's a big chunk of the book where you're just following the teenage girl, and then you do the young son, and then you do the mother, and then you do finally kind of at the very end the father, with some like jumping between. But he is the most like slightly like more mysterious figure in this, and you're seeing perspectives about how they feel about each other, like their recent family history. But basically they're all pretty unhappy, like they're kind of going through things in their own life. Like it's a very unhappy marriage, you know that from the get-go. The teen girl is going through a lot at school with her friends and like her exams, and the young son is kind of like being quite ignored by everybody. So I'd start off by saying this book is filled with very unlikable characters. Every single person was unlikable in their own way, and some of the more like obviously unlikable people were actually ended up being my favorite, because the other people, I'm not sure what the author was intending, or whether he was intending them to be that unlikable. You know, when it's made more obvious, you can actually then kind of root for a person, but like these people, I'm like, I think actually you tried to make this into being like a more morally grey person, or like someone I'm supposed to feel sorry for, but they are just awful. My battery is about to die, so I can't rant about this book for too long, but basically it's very slow. Nothing really happens. It's just talking about how this family got to be so miserable. Spoiler alert, it's all because of the decisions that they're making themselves. The only character that I really cared about was the mum, who's grown up in a very different environment to like the dad's family. And basically you're following the story of how they got to be in this like very very loveless marriage with each other, and how it got to be this point of like the business is failing, like they can't afford to send their daughter to university, like everything's getting to this crisis point, and the dad has decided to go into the woods and build a bunker to like prep for doomsday. And you're like trying to figure out this whole time, like, what's going on with the dad? Like, oh my god, like where's all the money gone? Like, why is he being so weird? And then finally when you get his perspective, it's just like, he's just the worst. He's not like this morally grey, like interesting character. He just like makes the boring choice and like makes choices that like will not just ruin his own life and any chance he could have of happiness, but also everyone around him, ruining their life too. And there is like no way that he can then go and fix anything about this situation. He just like continually avoids everything and makes it so much worse. So like the whole time you're reading this book, you're expecting to kind of like get this moment with like where you understand this dad, but he's just awful and like doesn't make any sense, but not even in an interesting way, in a very boring way. It's like, so like big spoilers, but yeah, he cheated. Like he was cheating on his wife because he doesn't love her anyway. He only married her because he felt guilty in the first place. And then after he cheated, he let himself be blackmailed, and then he lost his business, and then his dad had to step in, and then he just runs away into the woods and avoids everything. And there gets to be a point at the very, very end of this book where like I was like, oh my god, this is actually going to be quite good right at the end here. There is a moment that is like high drama. They are all in this wood together. It's pitch black at night. Every member of the family's there. You're jumping from POV to POV within their heads, and they're all like converging to this one place. One of them's got a gun. Like there's other dangerous people in this wood. Like everything is like really pacey and really like, oh my god, what's actually happening? Some people are like genuinely like splitting from reality a bit. So you're like, oh, this is really interesting. And then they come and it's almost together. There's almost this point of like massive like climax, and the book just ends. It just literally ends right there. I genuinely, like, if I would have had the physical book, I would have thrown it at the wall. I was like, that cannot be how this whole thing ends. I did not read almost 700 pages for it to end like that. I was so frustrated. This book just absolutely wasn't for me. And the reason why it's annoyed me even more is because I didn't DNF. Like, I actually had hope because I was interested in some of the stories. I liked the mum story and I liked some of the writing as well. But it just went on and on and on, and then it just ended like that. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, seriously, how are people rating this 5 stars? Like, I just didn't like it at all. It was not good. Not for me. Will not be reading any more of the author's other books. So that one was the worst book that I read this month, easily. And I'd be really interested to know if anyone's read this book, what was your take on it? Have you ever seen anyone else negatively talk about this? Because I've only ever heard people rave review about this book. So maybe I'm just actually insane and I just like read it wrong or something, but you know, I'm standing by it. It was like a 1.5 out of 5 for me. But let me quickly run you through the other books that I DNF'd this month. So I have 2 books here that I DNF'd. I DNF'd Voyage of the Damned. This one was really not for me. I did not enjoy the tone of voice in this book. It was like incredibly snarky. It's a fantasy world, but like I did not feel dropped into this fantasy at all, because like it was just very like, the world building was like incredibly, I don't know, like they'd be running around in this like fantasy world and then someone would be like, oh yeah, and then I ate a hot dog. Like it was just really weird. And I did not like the tone of the main character's voice at all in that. Also a lot of the aesthetics just like weren't for me. It was like everyone's magical power was like, it showed up with their hair colour, and I just didn't like the main character at all. And then I also DNF'd Prophet, which I might go back to. I got about 10% into this book, and then I found out apparently this is fan fiction for Inception. So the 2 people, not the main people in Inception, it's the 2 people, the one who's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the one who's played by the other guy. They have like 2 lines together in the actual movie of Inception. But apparently this is fan fiction for that. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe I'm just completely lying. But anyway, that's not why I stopped reading it. I got about 10% in. And it was like pretty intriguing. I just like wasn't absolutely loving it. And then I was listening to a different audiobook, and then it was gonna like be returned to the library, so I went back to that one. So it's a soft DNF. I might go back to this one. Basically, the main character in this like can tell every time someone's lying, but he can't tell for this one specific guy. I think there's going to be like a romance in this. It's also this really weird like sci-fi setup, so maybe I'll go back to that. But that is it from me today. That is all of the 16-ish books that I read in the month of November. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought as well. Leave me a comment below with the best thing that you read in November, because I'm always looking for recommendations. And please remember to like this video and subscribe and go and watch all of my other videos, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!